Excellent. Hello, everyone on Zoom. You hear us? We got a thumbs up. Excellent. Good to go? Good morning, Rabosai. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Happy Rosh Chodesh Adar. Today is Daf Yomi Chagigah 22. We have sponsorships today from Michael and Rachel Terniansky in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Michael's brother, Alan Terniansky, Avram Yitzchak ben Shlomo Yaakov. Shimon Yaakov. Thank you, Shkrech. By Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's grandparents, Samuel Pollack, Zechariah ben Zechariah Zol, Annie Pollack, Dinah Bas Rav Dov Zol. By Art and Sherry Miller, in loving memory of Art's brother, Richard Miller, Reuven ben Betzalel of Rachel Zol. Week of Learning sponsorship by Al and Sarah Steinberg for Refuah Shlema of Shulamis Bas Shusha. Daf Yomi sponsors, two sponsors, my mother, Yasher Koach Rabbi Kalman Akiva Kovacs, and by my uncle and aunts, Menachem Saralea Kovacs, in honor of Rabbi Kalman Akiva Kovacs, big Yasher Koach nephew. Wow. So keeping it in the family here, today's daf is Chagigah 22. We are picking up at the very top of 22. Now remember, yesterday we restarted the Mishnah. This Mishnah is actually the first Mishnah of the last parak of Moed, which is a friendly reminder that our Siyum on Moed is next Wednesday night. Our learners sent out an email. We've sent messages on the WhatsApp. Please come next Wednesday night. Come to the Siyum. Moed is a big chunk of Shas, and you should be very proud of yourselves for finishing a big piece of Shas. Shkoyach. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. And Misha Nichnas Adar, Marbim B'Simcha. It's Adar Sheni, so double the Simcha, and we're going to have a beautiful Siyum next week, God willing. So yesterday we were talking about the malos, the 11 advantages, or chumros, you could call it, by kodshim versus truma. So we talked about in the Mishnah the cases of chatzitza that Rava said one's a chatzitza and one's a gezerah. And the other taich was they're both cases of chatzitza. So remember, Rava said, we finished up, that the case of gezerah is if you tovel kli within kli, you put a small kli in a big kli, we're worried the opening of the big kli might not be big enough. It might not be what we call shiful ferotanud, which is 2 fingers, and you can rotate them. The poskim say it's about 2 inches, 3 inches at most, and that's an opening to allow the mikvah water to get in properly and to tovel everything inside the kli. Remember, it came up, Rabbi Silver mentioned at the end of yesterday, this comes up by building a mikvah itself. And since Rabbi Silber promised us a spa-grade mikvah, Emir Hashem, in the new building, I'm going to tell you that this halacha is nogeya if you want a spa-grade mikvah, because what do you do, Rabbi say, to build a mikvah? You have rainwater gathered into a pit, or if in places like Phoenix, Arizona, you bring in snow or ice, you let it melt into the basin, but you don't tovel in that, Rabbi. So you build another basin, another reservoir right next door. And you put in the wall in between the original mikvah water and the basin you're going to use for tevilah, for immersion, you put a hole in that wall, kishoferes anud, the 2 fingers. And what do? You close up that hole, and you fill up the basin for tevilah from the tap, from hose water, from anything, mayim shuvim even. Then when you open up that hole, you perform what's called in halacha hashaka, meaning kissing, that your original mikvah water is now going through this hole, is kissing the water in the new reservoir, and it makes that into a mikvah. The Shulchan Aruch says you can even close the hole after that. Tazna Shachse Lechatchila, leave it open. So then, when that reservoir you dip into, it gets a little schmutzed up. You can close the hole, plug the hole, drain it, clean it, refill it from the hose, from Shemaim Shuvim, open the hole again, boom, hashaka, it's a mikvah again. It's a beautiful thing. When you go to the mikvah, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, you can look in the wall, and you're going to see a hole in the wall. And that's the hashaka hole. That's the kishoferes anud that we're talking about in the halacha today. You can actually test it. You can put in 2 fingers and make sure that you can rotate 2 fingers. Or both sides. Do not put in 3. Do not put in 4. It's only 2 fingers. Do not be that guy who gets stuck in the mikvah close to Shkia, Erev Yom Kippur. Don't be that guy, okay? It's 2. Shoferes anud is 2, okay? So picking up at the very end of the top line of 22, Chagigah, Chof Beis, Amud Aleph, Sover Law, Gahad Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Ravua. So Rava, who says it's the Gezerah, Atu, the 2 fingers, Feres and Nud, he says Yud Aleph Malus Shanukan. Our Mishnah teaches 11 teachings about Kodshim. It goes to 11. Sheish Rishonos, Bein the Kodesh, Bein the Chulin, Shnaz Taras Kodesh. The first 6 apply both to real Kodesh, Mamish Karbanos, or to Chulin, that somebody's treating on the level of Karbanos. Remember, he's a Kohen. He wants to bring all of his food like that. Other people explain that he sells wine or flour or oil for the needs of Karbanos. He wants to keep all of his things tahor on that level. So the first 6 have what we said, Rashi explained yesterday, or Silver cited the Rashi, they have drara de tuma deraisa. They could become tamei deraisa, so the first 6 apply even to chulin nasers taras kodesh. Achronos, the last ones, the kodesh, avalo the chulin shnasel taras kodesh. Those only apply mamish to mamish karbanos. My ika bain de Ravi Ilah. So remember, Rabbi Ilah had said that the Mishnah lists 2 cases of chatzitza, the kli within a kli. He says it was not a gezerah atu shebeferes hanud. It was not a gezerah to the 2-finger opening. That was another case of chatzitza. So in his mind, the Mishnah only goes to 10. And Rava said, no, the Mishnah goes to 11 because one's a case of chatzitza and one's a case of the gezerah. Atu, the opening of the bottle needs to be 2 fingers. Sheferes hanud. Ika benau salva gargutni, a big basket or a gargutni, which of course is a strainer. When you're making wine, you step on the grapes in the upper vat, and the liquid trickles down to the reservoir at the bottom where it's going to ferment. But you want this gargutni as a big strainer to catch the wines, the grape skins and the schmutz from going down to the reservoir. Shemilan kalim, you put smaller kalim inside, v'edbila, then you lowered it into the mikveh. If you're going to tovel 100 new forks, knives, spoons, and grapefruit spoons, and salad forks and everything, just put it all in a basket and lower the whole basket in. That's what he's saying to do. The Madar Mishim Chatzitza, Rabbi Law says it's a chatzitza. If you have something heavy on top of the basket, there could be a chatzitza there. Rashi said yesterday, at least it looks like a chatzitza. It's karov to be a chatzitza. Ika. So that's a problem. Manda Amar, but by Ravo says Mishim Gezeira Shema Yitbo Machtin Sinoris Beklish Ein Piv Vishaferes Anud. So if, like Rava said, there are 11 cases in the Mishnah, and the case is you don't want to tovel in a bottle or a flask that has an opening that's not wide enough to let the mikveh water come through, so that wouldn't be a problem. Why? Because salvagar gutni she'en bepikim kishaferes anud leika. There's no such thing as a basket or a strainer that doesn't have an opening big enough. The Tosfos Rid here points out, by definition, the basket and strainer don't even have a lid. So there's no such thing as a basket or strainer with a lid less than 2 fingers to let the mikveh water in, because they don't even have a lid. So like my Rosh Hashivas, that's all he always said, define your terms. If a basket has no lid, beautiful. You know what it is? If you're having a discussion, having a discussion with somebody, and it keeps going in circles, have them define their terms. You define your terms. If somebody is arguing, well, this is this, this is that, they can't even define what a man is, what a woman is, what their terms are, get them to define their terms, and you can clarify what's really going on. Know what you know. Define your terms. That's the Musar here. So anyway, these things have no lid, so there's no gezerah, no reason to be gozer, because there's no lid to have a hole not big enough to let the mikveh water in. So you can go ahead and tovel your kalim there, according to Rava. As the Rava Lataime, Rava follows his reasoning, like what he taught us. Amar Rava salvar gugutane shemil and kalim. You can put a bunch of small kalim in your basket or your strainer. Hitbilan taharim. You can lower it into the mikveh. They're all tahar. But a mikveh itself, shechilku b'salvar gagutni, the mikveh wasn't very big. What's the minimum size of a mikveh for a person? 40 seah. Beautiful. And our chachamim measure that 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amma. Now, Taisa says a person's a little taller than 3 amma, but you bend down, you get everybody in, it's fine, it's big enough. So what if you had a mikveh that's small-sized and somebody put a basket in as like a divider, a strainer to catch, the forks that are falling into the mikveh? He says, a tovel shamla also lo tevila. Rava says that doesn't work. It doesn't work if you have a basket, even though the basket is porous and water gets through. It doesn't work if the basket's blocking some of the mikveh. Teha'ara, because the earth itself, kula chalchule mechalchala. The earth is porous. We know that water seeps through the earth. There's such thing as a mayan, a well, a spring. Water is trickling through the dirt itself. Uveinan, but the Torah requires deika mem seah b'makom echad. You have to have 40 seah in the same place, even though theoretically all of the groundwater in the dirt in the world is sort of interconnected. It can trickle slowly, at least, through the dirt. We need mem seah in one place, and Beis Yosef discusses this. This is in the beginning of Hilchas Mikvahs. So since we're on Mikvahs, it's kedai to read this. So in the Torah, he says, Tzricha shetitbol b'mei mikvah. A woman needs to go to the mikvah. Sheyesh bo arbaim sah. It has to have arbaim sah. Afilu einan mayim chayim. Even if it's not a spring, a mayan, which is called mayim chayim in the Torah, living water, flowing water. Shein tzarich mayim chayim el zav. Only a zav needs that. Lo need a zava. Im lo titbol b'mayan. Afim tipo mayan, even if she goes to a mayan, a spring, tzarich shebo or baim seah. Even a spring needs 40 seah in the same place. But hold that thought for a minute. Afogav de mayan mitar bakoshu. Even though a mayan is mitar koshu, hanu dav to the kli. That's a kli. Now you've heard like a needle could technically be purified in a tiny mikvah. It just needs to be bigger than the kli itself. Even a small person, even a child going to the mikvah, he could technically fit in a mikvah less than 40 seah. You need the 40 seah. Harambam, V'Raivid, Kasvu, but they disagree. They say, Af Adam and Tarba Mayan Kolshahu. A spring that's Kolshahu, flowing water, even if it's not Arbaim Sa, would work. Ari Kasav Asfar Rishono, Lazay Hiskim Avi Ezri, Rosh. The Torah's father is the Rosh. So he calls the Rosh Avi Ezri. So this is interesting. Aval im rachza b'merchatz. A woman goes to the bath. She takes a bath. O alu alea kol meimos shebeolam. Or she showers in all the water of the world. Hare b'tumasa. She's still tamei. This is why we tell our wives and our daughters when they're in the shower so long, what are you using all the water in the world? That's the Torah right here in Reish Mem and Yeridea. So that's a makor for that. But the Beis Yosef says really interestingly here. He says now the Mayan. The Beis Yosef brings many rayas about this discussion. Does the mayan, the flowing water, the spring, the Meitzeveria, does it need 40 seah in one place? And he says no. He says you need a place big enough for the person to fit, but you don't need mem seah in one place as long as the entire flow of the mayan has mem seah. And this can come up if you're in the old city where they have the little river underground, the underground river. That's from a mayan. That's flowing water. And maybe this one place isn't mem seah, but if it's big enough to fit your body, since it's connected to mem seah, according to Beis Yosef, it's still a mikvah. This will come up in the future when a spring, a mayim chayim, will issue forth from where in the future? From the Beis HaMikdash, the Kodesh Golashim, yeah. And it's going to, it's going to start off very small. Remember, it's a beautiful Agadah, but it's going to be halacha l'maisa. This Mayim Chaim, the spring, will start off small from the Beis HaMikdash and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it turns out, even in the small part, as long as you can fit your body, according to Beis Yosef, you can tovel in this future spring water coming from the temple because it's connected, all of it connected is way more than 40 seah. So even in the smaller part, you could be tovel. He says interesting also, you can, he says from the Maharik, you can dig a well. If you dig a hole, you dig a well, and then water flows into that. That's not Mayim Shuvim, because Hashem is basically causing the water through the miracle of geology to come into the well and fill it up. He says that's also a Mayan, that's also Mayim Chaim. So this is the Beis Yosef who's going to allow us to be tovel in the river coming out of the Beis HaMikdash, Bimheira, B'Yamenu. But this is the din of Mikvah and Mayan. They are two different things. Mayan is flowing water. An ocean is also considered a Mayan. And a Mikvah has to be standing water. It can't be, Dafka can't be flowing water. So that's Mikvah and Mayan, and that's the makor for women taking long showers. Tell them, no, you don't take a long shower. Go to the Mikvah, go to the Mayan. That's what the halacha is. Good, beautiful. So that's our quick review of Mikvayos. Hani Mile, and these words, Rashi says, going back to what we said, is if you're tovel kli b'toch kli, you put your needles or your little forks inside a bottle, and you tovel it. Rava says, gezerah, the opening might not be big enough, might not be sheferes anud, and the mikvah water doesn't get in properly, and so those kelim are still tamei. We make a gezerah, we don't let you do that, because sheferes anud. So hani mile, this applies with kli tahor. When the outer kli, the bigger kli, the bottle is already pure. It doesn't need to go to the mikveh. Well, but kli tamei, if itself is tamei, migu the cycle tevila kule gufe demana, since tevila helps for the entire substance of that kli, meaning you're going to be careful to get mikveh water into the entire kli, even if the opening is pretty small. Salka lahu nami lekelim de ispe. It also works for the little kelim inside. So even if your bottle has a small opening, since it's tamei, it needs to go to the mikveh, you could put smaller kelim, your little needles and forkulas inside, and the tevila will work for them. It's only when the outer kli is tahor that we have a gezerah. It's not like the Mishnah says, kelim, shemilan kelim. Kelim, you put kelim inside. This is a Mishnah in kelim. Ve'itbila, and you put them in the mikveh, harei elu taharin. They are tahor. V'im lo tavel, but if you didn't do tevila, mayim ha-me'oravim, adshu me'oravim sheferes hanud. The mixed water until it's mixed water like sheferes hanud, the two fingers around. My kamar, what are you talking about? Im lo tavel. What are you talking about if you didn't do tefillah? We're talking about tefillah. Haki kamar. This is what the Mishnah really means. Im eno tzarich lechat bilo. If you didn't have to be tovel the larger kli, the outside kli, the big bottle, mayim, and the Bach changes this, or you have a case of mayim uravim, you have a mikvah next to a mikvah, you need to mix the waters. Achi muravim sheferes hanud. You need an opening there, kisheferes hanud. Again, 2 fingers all around, needs to get in there. So that's if the outer kli is tahor and your inner kalim are tameh, you need an opening that big to make sure your mikvah waters get inside and be metaher the little kalim inside. Hadarava the relay tanahi, and this machlok is Rava, who holds it's a gezerah. He says the Mishnah has a case of chatzitza when you tied something in a knot. It has a case of a gezerah, kli b'toch kli, from the weight of the outer of the kli and top of the other kli. Might not work. Looks like a chatzitza. Ravi Law says no. It's both cases of chatzitza. Tonight it's machlokes tanaim to Tanya. The Brisa says salva gergutni, the basket and the strainer. Shemilan kalim. You put a bunch of kalim inside it. Bilan. And you put it in the mikvah. Bein the kodesh, bein the truma. It's a hayri, and it works for kodesh or truma. Abba Shaul Omer the truma. Abba Shaul says only the truma of alo the kodesh. Abba Shaul says like our Mishnah, but there's another Tanai who says, another Tana who says that it would work for kodesh also. Ihachi trumanami. So listen, if it's gonna work, it should also work for truma. Or if it's gonna be a problem, it should also be a problem for truma. What's the difference between truma and kodesh that Abba Shaul and our Mishnah are going on? If it looks like a chatzitza for kodesh, why doesn't it look like a chatzitza for truma also? If it's not a chatzitza for truma, how is it not a chatzitza also and not a problem for kodshim? Leman kamrinan. Who are we talking to? Who's going to come to ask a shaila? Chaverim. A chaver was also called a prushim. They're people who are meticulous and careful with tuma and tahara. Chaverim made a yodeh. Chaverim know about chatzitza. Chaverim know the halacha. Rashi here says something amazing. He says, "L'mi anu omrim haraza." Who do we say this psak halacha to? Shlo yapil kli b'toch kli, not to be tovel a kli inside a kli, at least for kodshim. L'chaver tilo amaretz lo asi l'kamal l'mishal, because amaretz they don't come to ask questions. Rabbosai, it's a gemara in brachas, and since we're about to finish moed, it's kedai to review brachas and zerayim. And the Mishnah is on Mem Zayin. It talks about making a zimun with an amaretz. Remember this, making a zimun. Who can you make a zimun to? If someone's eating truma and someone's eating chulin, maybe you shouldn't make a zimun. They're going to come to eat each other. And so it says you don't make a zimun on an amaretz, and then you have all these definitions of who's an amaretz. Maybe he doesn't put on tefillin, maybe he doesn't put on tzitzis, he doesn't send his kids to a religious school. Listen to this, Rabbosai, you're going to love this. A chayrim omrim, a filu, kara v'shana, he read the Tanakh, he learned the Mishnah, v'lo shimish talmidei chachamim. He didn't do shimish talmidei chachamim. Hareze amaretz. Person could know all the Mishnayos, all the Tanakh, and still be an amaretz because he doesn't come to the Rebbeim to ask the questions about the application of the psukim and the Mishnah. He doesn't come to ask. Now you're probably wondering because just last week we were talking about acherim. Who's acherim? Elisha ben Avuya. So that's a scary thing. If Elisha ben Avuya, who was a gadol ador who went to the Pardes and went off the derech, is saying this, there's something very important to Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. However, the Taisvos in many places points out that Rabbi Meir himself is also called Acher. Remember, Rabbi Meir was the last Talmud who still learned Elisha ben Avuya, and we explained about a week ago how he could still do this, that he took the valuable parts inside and threw out the klipa, that he was a gadol in Torah and he was following Hashem's derech and not Elisha's ben Avuya's derech. So sometimes when it says acherim in Shas, it means Rebbe Meir, and the Tosfos explains it says acherim because it's Rebbe Meir telling you a concept he learned from Elisha ben Avuya. We don't want to say the name Elisha ben Avuya because he went off the derech. And there's, Rebbe Meir says he did tshuva at the end, but he did a lot of bad in the middle. But we don't want to say his name. So when Rebbe Meir cites his Rebbe, Elisha ben Avuya, we say acherim. So Rebbe Meir, amazingly, continued to learn with Elisha ben Avuya and learned this concept and shares it, that even somebody who learns the psukim, learns the Mishnayos, but doesn't come and ask the questions and clarify things and figure it all out with the rabbis and get together and learn, still an Amaretz. You should know what we do here in the Daf Yomi. Since we're learning Talmud, the Maharsha says, this is Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. He says, learning up the Gemara, learning the Talmud, figuring this out, applying the Mishnayos, learning the Psukim and how they actually work in practice is Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. So Shkoyach Rabosai, we're not Amma Aretz, according to the Maharsha, and according to the Gemara in Brachos Mem Zayin. Baruch Hashem. So that's good. So who's going to come ask us questions? The Chaverim are going to come ask us questions, not the Amma Aretz. Chaverim Mediyah, they know the halacha about Na'amegei Chatzisa. Ihachi Kodesh Nami. So Kodesh Nami should be allowed because the people who are going to be Tovel, they know better. They're not going to make a Chatzitza. They're not going to allow it. What's going to happen? Chazele Amaretz, and Amaretz is going to see the Chaverim Tovel Kli B'toch Kli in the basket or whatnot. Azul Mapil, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to copy them. They're Shruma Nami. So the Gemara objects, Shruma Nami Chazele Amaretz Azul Mapil. He's also going to see you Tovel Kli B'toch Kli by Truma, and he's going to do the same thing for his Truma. And then his Truma might have a Chatzitza in the Mikvah. He's not going to be careful like a Chaver would. And his Truma will be Tameya when he gives it to the Kohen. A Kohen who's a Chaver, who's meticulous, who's a Parish, will not take Truma from an Amma Aretz because he's worried it might be Tameh. Said's looking at me like, you're right, I don't take Truma from an Amma Aretz. So Shkoyach. Kodesh Nami lo nekabel minahu. So if so, that the Amma Aretz is not careful about Chatzitza in the Mikvah, we shouldn't take Kodesh from him. This is amazing. We're about to say, Havile Eva. There will be dissension and discord and hatred if we don't take his Kodesh. Yeah? Truma nami chavile eva. If you don't take his Truma, it's also, he'll be insulted, right? It doesn't bother him. Because he can give it to a Kohen who's also not so meticulous on Tahara. He has someone to give his Truma to, but he doesn't have someone to give his Kochim to. There's only one Beis HaMikdash, Rabbi. If you don't take the wine or the mincha or the animal that is from the Kochim of an Amaretz, he's got nowhere else to go. And who is worried about sowing dissension among the Jews? Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, the Tanya, there's a brayso. Rabbi Yossi mipnei ma hakol ne'amani mal taharis yain v'shemen kol yom Hoshana. Why do we believe anyone who comes to the temple bringing wine for libations, bringing oil for the menachos, all the days of the year? We're going to discuss that later on in our parak, that certain times people would be mentar their kelim, and they're more believable then that they were tahar. Because if you don't take his kochim, he's going to build his own bama in the backyard. And he's going to burn his own paraduma to be mentar himself. So it's an amazing thing. If you don't let the Amma Aretz bring their karbanos and bring their donations to the temple, fine, he'll build his own temple. What do I need you for? You have to include people who their heart is in the right place. They might not know every detail, but their heart is in the right place. It's l'shem shemaim. And the Rashi here says, what's going to do? Bone bama, b'shas isra bama. So we know after the temple was built, there's no more bama, which is like building your own personal mizbeach and having a backyard barbecue, but it was a backyard barbecue, and they would bring their carbon nedava in their own backyard. You could do that before the Beis HaMikdash. After the Beis HaMikdash, you can't do it anymore. But what's he going to do? He's going to b'shas isra bama. He's going to build a bama umaktir l'shamayim. He's not doing avodah zarah, chas v'shalom. He's a Jew. He's a yid. But if you don't let him into the temple, you say, I'm worried your mincha there might be tameh because you maybe had a chatzitza in your clay. He says, what are you talking about? He'll go and he'll burn it in his own backyard to Hashem because his heart's in the right place. He just doesn't know all the rules and all the details. So we have to make an allowance for him. We have to get him involved. We said last week, so they would let them bring the animal to the Ezras Nashim and have the Nashim do a token smicha so they'd feel involved. They'd get involved. They could be a part of it. We want everyone within the bounds of halacha, within acceptability, to be a part of it. His heart's in the right place. Let him come and be a part of it. If not, he's gonna, start up his own backyard bama, his own quasi-religion. He's gonna make sex. This is Rabbi Yossi's warning us about. Amar of Papa, Kiman mekablin ha'idna sadusa ma'amaretz. So, who do we follow when we accept testimony now from an amaretz? Come on, Rabbi Yossi. That's Rabbi Yossi. We pass him like Rabbi Yossi. The Tosfos here points out. He says the Rav Elchanan, one of the early Rishonim, Omer Dekaim belong Rabbi Yossi. We hold like Rabbi Yossi. Chashinan la'eva. We're worried about making divisions. Lefichach mizamni nachshav b'kol ha'aretz. We make a zimun. Remember, that's the Gemara in Brachos Mem Zayin Amud Beis, like we just cited. Who's an amaretz? Don't make a zimun on. We make a zimun. He says we make a zimun on anyone today. Because we don't want to make Ava, we don't want to be we don't want people saying, "Oh, I'm better than him. I'm more tahor than him. I'm more, he might be tameh. He might, We make a zimun for everybody. We try to invite everybody in. We try to get them in the Daf Yomi to ask questions, get answers, get clarity. The only difference between an Amaretz and a Chaver is their knowledge. everyone can have the knowledge. It says in Pirkei Avos, there's 48 crowns of the Torah, and anyone can come and take them. Anyone can come and take that wisdom and become a master of Torah and knowledge. We want to get them in the door. That's the idea. That's Rabbi Yossi. So good. So his kli, he might not be careful for truma. Nechush l'sheila. Let's worry about borrowing his kli. So we're going to see from here, we're going to learn out, we have a side of Mishnah that learns out that Chaverim used to borrow kelim from Amaretz. They weren't a separate nation. They were next door neighbors and friends and relatives. Just now the Mishnah says, a kli cheres matzil al kol. Kli cheres blocks everything. Divrei Beis Hillel. You're going to ask me why Beis Hillel is listed before Beis Shammai. We'll get to that at the end. Save your questions. Beis Shammai omrim. Beis Shammai replies, Eino matzil. Kli cheres does not block tuma. Ela ochlino mashkino kli cheres. It only blocks on food and drink and other kli cheres. So what's going on? There's two potential cases here. If you have a kli cheres, an earthenware, porcelain, earthenware clay pot, and it's sealed up, that blocks the tuma because the kli cheres only gets tame from the inside, not from the outside. So if you have a sealed clay vessel, whatever's inside is tahor, even if it was an ohel mace, even if, God forbid, someone passed away, whatever's in a sealed clay pot is still tahor. Or you could have a case where somebody's about to pass away downstairs, and then upstairs is a separate rishus, but there's a skylight in the middle, so the tumah is going to go up. But if you put a kli cheres into that skylight and block it off, that kli cheres could block the tumah, and then even when the guy passes away downstairs, upstairs everything is still tahor. So kli cheres midiraisa, it saves, it blocks tumah, because it's only mekabel tumah from the inside, not the outside. Amru lahem Beis Hillel leBeis Shammai. Mipnei ma amru. Mipnei ma. What are you talking about? That a kli cheres only saves food and drink, and other kli cheres, not metal and glass and wood and other things. Amru Beis Shammai mipnei shehu tamei. Al gav amaretz. The kli cheres we're talking about is tamei because it belongs to an amaretz, and amaretz is tamei derabanan because again he's not careful with chatzitza at the mikvah. He's not necessarily careful, so. Anyone ever tells you you should be ashamed of yourself, don't listen. Take that with a grain of salt. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe they're just trying to manipulate you. Maybe they're trying to make you feel ashamed to control you. You should, judge yourself through the lens of Torah, not necessarily through the lens of other people who are subjective. So here, Rabbi Shua is saying an important thing. I'm ashamed, I don't understand you. Efshar isha lasha ba'reva. Is it possible a woman is kneading upstairs? Isha v'reva tamei. And you tell me the kli cheres doesn't block the tumah. So she and her bowl are tamei. Shiva, for 7 days, they need paraduma to fix them, a botzek tar, but the dough inside is still tar, still edible. How could this be? You're going to tell me lugi and malay mashkin? You're going to tell me cups full of drink. Lugi and tame tuma shiva, mashkin tarin? The cups themselves are tame and the drink inside is tahar? I mean, Rabbi Shua is shocked. How could this sounds contradictory. Nitpalo Talmid Echad Mitalmidei Beis Shammai. So one Talmud from Beis Shammai came. Amar lo Amor lecha Taima shel Beis Shammai. Could I tell you the reasoning behind Beis Shammai? Amar le Amar, please. I have to know. I'm ashamed that I don't understand. Amar lo. So the Beis Shammainik, he said, Kli Tamei Chotzet Zoeino Chotzet. Again, this is interesting. The Talmud from Beis Shammai, he's not saying is a Kli Tamei Chotzet. He's not saying Kli Tamei is not Chotzet. He's saying, listen, is it or isn't it? Is it a Kli that's already Tamei? Kli Cheres that's already Tamei. It's already Tamei. Does it block Tuma? Amar le Eino Chotzet. No, if it's already Tamei, it doesn't block Tuma. And he says, Kli shel Amaretz, Tamei or Tahar. Isn't Amaretz's Kli? Is that Tamei or Tahar? Amar lo Tamei, yeah. It's already Tamei. It's Tamei on a Dirabanan level because we're worried about him. Imata Omer lo. He says, but listen, the Beis Shammainik says to Rabbi Yeshua, if you tell him Tamei, you tell him everything is Tamei, everything in your sealed Kli Cheres is Tamei, everything in your upstairs that was blocked by Kli Cheres is Tamei, Klu Mashgiach Lecha, is he even going to listen to you? You tell him everything's Tamei, he's going to say, it's a Pollack. He's going to say, it's a Mefurish Pollack, that a Kli Cheres with a lid, a Kli Cheres can block a Tumah. It's deraisa. That's what he's going to tell you. He's not going to listen to you if you tell him everything's Tamei. Oh, not only that, Elashimata Omer lo Tamei. If you tell him everything is Tamei, even the food and the drink and everything, Melacha, he's going to tell me, Shalit Tahor. He's telling me it was in a sealed Kli Cheres. It was blocked by Kli Cheres. Everything's Tahor. Shalchat Tamei. You Prushim, you're crazy. You Chaverim, you're not my Chaver. You're nuts. You're going against the Din Torah. So it's going to be like what we said on Amud Aleph, like Rabbi Yossi said, Mishum Eva, he's going to go build his own Bama, sorv his own Paraduma, start up his own Das Ke'ilu, make his own sect, because he's going to say, you guys are crazy. A Kli Cheres blocks Tuma. So you should know there's actually a Machlokas Rishonim. Are we talking about a Kli Cheres here, Dafka of an Amaretz? Or like Rambam says, any Kli Cheres, it's actually a Gezerah, that even a Kli Cheres of a Chaver would not block Tuma. So that the Amaretz is going to see this, and it's taking into account that the Kalim of the Kli Cheres of the Amaretz are Tamei Derabanan, so they don't necessarily block Tumah on a Derabanan level. Deraisa it's Tower. Deraisa it works. But Derabanan, since his Kalim are Tamei, they can't block Tumah. Zehu Tamei Beis Shammai. That's the reason Beis Shammai. Biyad Hal Rabbi Yeshua, Nishtateach Al Kivrei Beis Shammai. Rabbi Yeshua went to the cemetery. He bowed down by the graves of Beis Shammai. Apparently it was Beis Shammai. Maybe it was Shammai himself and his Talmidim. So you see there's some Hasidim that want to be buried by the Rebbe, so this could be a Makor. Amar Nanesi Lechem, I've wronged you, Asmos Beis Shammai. Mastumos Shalachem Kach. Your, undecipherable rulings have so much wisdom and psychology behind them. Mefrashas Alhaz Kamakama. So your Mefurish Dinim must be even better. So this is why Beis Hillel was listed first in this Mishnah as Mishnah Adiyos, because at the end of the Mishnah it says Beis Hillel retracted and ruled like Beis Shammai. It's one of those occasions where Beis Hillel went like Beis Shammai. Amru kol yamav chushru shinav mipnei Tan Yosef. So Rabbi Yeshua's teeth were darkened, maybe demineralized, because he was fasting to atone for insulting Beis Shammai. Because Beis Shammai had a good reason that psychologically, if you tell the Amaretz, listen, everything's Tamei, and he'll be like, it was in a sealed Kli Cheres. The Torah says it's Tahor. You guys are crazy. I'm Tahor. You guys are Tamei. So you tell him, listen, so as a chumrah, you should be tovel the glass and the wood and the metal that was in there. But listen, you can eat the stuff, you can drink the stuff. The Kli Cheres is still fine. Because deraisa, yeah, it is. And derabanan, if you tell him, listen, we're worried about you guys might have a chatzitza in the mikvah, he's not going to listen. So we want to get the guy in the door. We want him asking questions. We want a dialogue. We want him learning more about Tumah V'Tahara, not feeling rejected and dejected and ignoring us. Katani Miha, so it teaches anyway, L'cha V'lo. Alma Shalina Minayo, so we see that a chaver can borrow kalim from an Amaretz. The Gemara says, Ki Shalina Minayo, when we do borrow from him, mat bilin lahu, we put them in the mikvah. When we don't borrow Kli Cheres, we don't borrow food and drink. When you borrow metal or glass or wood, put it in the mikvah first. Ihachi, nahadrule Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel should answer Beis Shammai, Ki Shalina Minayo, mat bilin lahu. No, so what if it gets Tamei Derabanan? We always put it in the mikvah anyway, whatever we borrow from them. Tamei meis by hazag yemo v'zayin, but something that was tamei from exposure to a dead body, and avatuma, it needs to have hazah on day 3 and day 7, then go in the mikvah. So mana l'zayin yamei lo mushla in ship. People normally lend kalim for more than 7 days. This is actually a hidden musar. If you're quote unquote borrowing something for a long time, you should probably try to give it back, or ask the guy, listen, we're trying to give this to me. I've been borrowing this for 3 years now. You want your lawnmower back? What's going on? There are some very scary Zohar-type texts that say people who borrow something and don't give it back, they get reincarnated in a way to get the thing back or pay back or give the guy the value back. So try to give stuff back, basically. Let's just stick to the Gemara. Give stuff back, okay, within 7 days. Do we don't believe the Am Haaretz that he put something in the mikvah? Tanya, but the Raisa says, Ne'emanim Am Haaretz al Taharas Tevilah. Tevilas Tamei Meis. We believe them to say they put something in the mikvah for Tamei Meis. Now remember, Tamei Meis needs Hazah on day 3, day 7, and then to go to the mikvah. Rabbi lo kasha. Rabbi says not a kasha. Ha begufa ha bekelav. We could believe him about putting his own body in the mikvah after the sprinklings for tumas meis, but not about his kalim. Rav Amar idiva kelav. Rava says no. We're talking about his kalim. Velo kasha. It's not a kasha. It depends on what he says. Ha de Amar. When the Amar tells us me'olam lo hitbal dekli b'tokli, he says I never was tovel kli within a kli. I don't know what you prushim are doing for your truma, but I would never put kalim within kalim and put them in the mikvah. So there's no chance of having a problem not having an opening big enough. The hada amar hitbalti, yeah, I put kalim within kalim to do tefillah. Although hitbalti b'klisha ein b'shveres anud, but I was always careful. There was shveres anud, so the mikvah water would get in. Mostly, that's the whole point of the gezerah, was toveling a kli within a kli. If the kli has a lid, it's not a basket or a strainer. There's a chashash. We're worried it might not have an opening big enough. That's the whole gezerah. So he tells you, yeah, I was tovel a kli with a little kalim within a bottle, but don't worry, it was big enough. That's the whole gezerah. We're worried it wasn't big enough, so we're not going to accept him. What he says about his kalim in the mikvah. Hatanya, and the Bryce also says, usually Hatanya is like a kasha. Here it's like, and also, Bryce says, Ne'eman am aretz lomar peiros lo huchshru. He can tell you, listen, these peiros, after they were cut off the ground, they never got wet. To me, a kabel tuma, aval eno ne'eman lomar peiros huchshru, aval indimu. We don't believe him if he says, yeah, they got wet and they're makabel tuma, but don't worry, there was never sheretz, I didn't touch it, whatever, because he's not so careful. We're not going to accept that. So Rava's mecholek, if there was never a chance of tuma, we're going to believe what he says. If there was some chance, we're not going to believe. We're worried that these things did get tamei. Agufo l'mi behemna. Do we believe in Am Haaretz about his body being in the mikveh after being tamei meis? V'atanya, but there's a brisa. Chaver shabala hazos. A chaver comes and says, "Listen, I was with a dead body 3 days ago. Today's the 3rd day. It was Monday. Now it's Wednesday. I need some hazah. I need some paraduma, please. Mazin alav miyad. We can start sprinkling. Mazin means we sprinkle alav miyad right away. Am Haaretz shabala hazos. And Am Haaretz says, listen, I think I was exposed to a dead body. It was an olam meis, something like this. Lalenu ein mazin alav ad shiyasu b'fneinu shlish v'shi. We wait until 3 days later, or on the 3rd day, then we start the hazah process. Elamar abayi mitoch chomishach martalav b'tchilato, because we're machmir on the Am Haaretz originally, make him wait till the 3rd day to get the first hazah. Hakalta alav b'sev. We can be mekel at the end and assume we really went to the mikvah after the hazah on day 7, because we're machmir, make him wait. So we assume we went to the mikvah on time. It's interesting because we're about to start Yavamas. The last parak of Yavamas has something the opposite. We're mekel on someone at the beginning because we're machmir at the end. There's the last parak of Yavamas. Anyone know what the case is? You guys haven't learned Yavamas yet. Wait. Don't worry, we'll get soon. We're coming up on Yavamas. It's lo leinu in a guna, a woman whose husband goes overseas. He never comes back. And we would allow her to get remarried even with one witness, even on sort of more attenuated testimony that her husband passed away. Why? Because if she goes ahead and gets remarried on the basis of this kula, then if her husband shows up alive, the first husband shows up alive, we're very machmir that she can't be married to any of these guys. She's stuck. It's a big deal. So because we're machmir at the end, we can be mekel at the beginning, because daika mitzvah, women are going to check it out very carefully because they know that the consequences are extremely dire. So that's kind of the opposite of here, because we're machmir at the beginning, he takes it seriously. We mekel at the end, trust him that he went to the mikvah. Achrayim lev'toich, the Mishnah said it has a back and an inside. Machrayim v'toich, it's not like the Mishnah says, kli shenitma achorav, a kli that became tamei on the backside, b'mashkin, with liquids, achorav tamein, tocho, ogno, ozno, yadav, but the inside, the ogen, the handle, the ozno, the ear-like handle for a pitcher, the yadav, and any other handles, tahorin, nitma tocho, but the inside gets tamei, kulo tamei. So Taisvos points out why we're talking about a liquid, because the tuma of liquids is derabanan. The bottom Taisvos says midiraisa ein ochel mashke mitame kli. Midiraisa, food and drink cannot make kelim tamei. V'rabanan hu degazer. Rabbis made a gezerah mishum mashke zava. The only liquids that are avatuma that can make kelim tamei deraisa is what comes out of the body of a zav or a zava. Isa benita, like you explained there, v'avabanan hakera. So the rabbis made a heker, a distinction with mashkim, that mashkim could tame partially. Midaraisa, once a kli, it's all or nothing. If it's tame, it's tame. If it's tahar, it's tahar. But since this is a tuma derabanan of liquids, normally liquids can't make a kli tame deraisa. It's only derabanan. So we say, listen, the outside got tame, but not the inside. This is a famous joke at yeshiva. He says, yeah, well, my pocket knife is flesh eggs, but the backside is milk eggs, and the tip is treif. You know, it's something like this. I mean, it's lav dafka like that, but they made a heker. They made it a little different, so we'd remember. A beis tzvita, the Mishnah mentioned. My beis tzvita. The Gemara says, what is that? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Makam Shitzovto. It's the place you hand over the kli. It's like the handle. Kenu Omer vayitz bot lo koli. Boaz handed over koli, parched grain, to Ruth, or Rus, if you like. Rabbi Asi, I'm multilingual, it's okay. Rabbi Asi, Amar Yochanan, Makum Shnekia das Tzovin. This beis tzvita is actually a dipping tray. You should see the stender here. It has a stender. And it has this little tray on the side, which is probably not for your Pelephone, but it has a little dipping tray on the side of the stender. You can come and look after it's beautiful. So it has a normal receptacle, and it has a little dipping tray, because their minhag was they would dip their bread and their food in vinegar and mustard, Rashi says, whatever, something like this. So it's a separate little receptacle on your main kli. Tani Rabbi Bibi Kamei Rav Nachman, Kol kelim ein lahem achrayim v'toch. He says, normally kelim don't have a backside or an inside. Echad kodshei mikdash, echad kodshei gvul. Whether it's mamish kodshim that use in the base of mikdash, or kodshei gvul, kodshim in the boundaries outside the mikdash. I'm like kodshei gvul, my ninhu. What are you talking about kodshei gvul? Truma? Talking about truma. That's something kodesh that you eat outside of the temple. Hatnan, but the Mishnah says achrayim v'toch beitz tzvita letruma. Truma has these distinctions. For truma, something can become tameh for truma on the outside, but on the inside. But for kodshim, it's all or nothing. Maybe you're talking about chulin that's being kept al taris kodesh. At Karin Milta Damar Rabba Baravua, we had this before. Achadesrei Milos Shanu Khan. Our Mishnah goes to 11. Sheish Rishonos, the first 6. Bein the Kodesh, Bein the Chulin Shnasal Taras Kodesh. Those apply both by Kodesh or Chulin Nasal Taras Kodesh, because there could be a tumah there. Deraisa. Achronos, the last 5. Le Kodesh Avalo the Chulin Shnasal Taras Kodesh. They were not necessary for Chulin done on Taras Kodesh. Remember, it's a big yesod of Emunah. 2,000 years ago, it was less than 2,000 years ago, they thought the temple might come back any day. So they were keeping their chulin. Some people were keeping chulin al taras HaKodesh. So for us, we're Mekayim, when we learn about Tumah and Tahara, what we're going to do when we have the temple again, B'meher V'meinu, just learning about it, it instills this emunah in us. We're going to need to know this. One more minute so we can do this part. Nosi at the medras, nosi as a truma. If you're carrying medras, you can carry truma of Alois Kodesh, but you can't carry kodshim. Kodesh, my time alo. Why can't you carry Kodshim? It's the event that actually happened. Someone's carrying a big bottle of wine that was supposed to be going to be used for Nisachim in the temple. Top of 23. He broke his sandal strap. And he picked it up. He put the sandal strap up on the top of the barrel. Big mistake, guys. V'nafla avera chavis, and the sandal strap went into the airspace of the barrel. V'nitmeis, and it got the wine in the barrel. Tameh b'oseh sha'amru. At that time they told you, and no says a midras. If you're carrying midras, the sandal strap in this case was midras. No says a truma. Truma you could. Avolo esa kodesh, but you can't have kodesh when you're carrying medras. The Gemara is going to talk about tomorrow, because we only make a gezerah based on the event that actually happened. They're not worried about outlandish cases. This actually happened, and that's what the Rabbanan said. Don't try it at home, folks. Chodesh tov, tzkul mitzvot, chazakim u'ruchim.
Actually, this was we did that for cell phone.
Yeah, it's good. Beta tzvita.
For cell phone, we did it.
It's called beta tzvita.
And you say it's not for cell phone. It is for cell phone.
It is for cell phone. Chazak
All days.